1:31 p.m. in the afternoon. Quick roll call. Ms. Zolotel, not on the phone. Mr. Weddleton, absent. Mr. Constance, are you there? Okay, so you're going to be on board for today, right?
Unless and until Ms. Zolotel arrives.
Okay, and of course, Mr. Trumbull here, and Cindy Heil, are you going to pinch hit for Deputy Commissioner Pokin?
I can.
Oh, I know you're capable. Okay, so we're going to figure you're going to sit in for her until she shows up. Okay.
That sounds fine.
Okay. So with that, I think we have a quorum, correct? Unless you think different.
We are with the quorum.
All right. Well, will you please do the public involvement announcement?
All AMATS committee meetings are open to the public, and the public is provided an opportunity to comment at each meeting. If we have a business item, we'll have a presentation by staff or the consultants. At that point, the committee will be given a chance to discuss it. After that, the public will be invited to comment, and then it will come back before the committee for final discussion, final decision.
Get that memorized by heart now. Okay. Moving on. Do we have an approval of the agenda for the day?
Move to approve. I'll second it.
Okay. Approved by Mr. Constance, seconded by Mr. Trombley. Any changes to the agenda? Hearing none. Any objections to adopting the agenda?
If I might, I would just ask that we take up item D before item A under section 7, only because I may not be able to stay the whole time, and that, of course, is of prime interest to me.
Okay. Any objection to flipping A for D on the agenda for information items? Hearing none. We'll go ahead and do that then, unless we need a formal vote. Correct. Okay. All right. Well, with that change, do we have any objections to approving that as amended? Hearing none, the amended agenda is approved. Okay, no meeting minutes this time, so we're going to move on to the action items. We have action item 5A, the only one of the day, MTP 2050 draft technical report, goals and objectives. Craig, do you have someone to present for that?
I do. Our senior planner, Aaron Yanganalen, will wow you.
Yeah.
Please remember this
Set
guy.
up expectations like that.
All right.
I'll try not to put you to sleep today.
Okay.
Wait. Hi, everyone. My name is Aaron Yanganalen. I'm the project manager for the 2050 MTP. So today we have for you the draft goals. We did bring these to the technical advisory committee, and they recommended these be released for a 30-day public comment period with any comments that we had heard during the TAC meeting to be included as part of the comment response summary. So I'll mention more about that when we get to the end as well. Just so you know, this presentation may look pretty familiar, but I have pared it down significantly from the hour and a half it took at the TAC to hopefully about 20 minutes, depending on questions. So I will keep it as brief as I can. So first thing I'd like to do, real quick introductions. We've talked about the project team, but I've never actually technically introduced everyone. So the project team is made up of the AMATS planners. So myself, Craig, Christine, John Cecil, and Joni Wilm. And then we have James Starzik from DOT and PF joining us. And then we have Bart Rudolph from Public Transportation Department, part of the team as well. So we have a pretty good group of individuals on this project. I'd like to quickly introduce our consulting team. Juan, are you online?
I am. Can you see me and hear me?
We can hear you and see you. Yes, go ahead.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks, Aaron, for the nice introduction. Hi, everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm Juan Lee. I'm R&M Consultants Planning Department Manager and a former AMATS planning staff. I am the consultant project manager on the 2050 MTP, and we've been working collaboratively with AMATS staff since August on the project. We have several other partners I wanted to introduce. They're not here today, but you'll be seeing them at interim updates to the policy committee and technical advisory committee as we work through the MTP development process. So locally, we have McKinley Research Group. They are an Alaskan economics firm who are updating the socioeconomic profile for the AMATS area, as well as they're providing projections on population and employment to inform the future model update and the plan. We also have RSG on our team. They are leading the travel demand model runs for the future network. That's going to be recommended in the MTP plan. Jacobs, who are local, and they're supporting us on the performance measures and recommendations as well. And then Burgess and Neipel, they are on our team. They have expertise in safety planning. And then I also have Ben with me. He's one of our technical transportation planners working at R&M, and Ben is going to introduce himself. Go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, hey everyone, I'm Ben Coleman. I'm a planner at R&M. I know quite a few of you from my time earlier at the Matsu Borough, where there's some collaboration on early planning efforts for the Matsu MPO. But it's been great collaborating with the project team, and I look forward to continue working on this project. Thank you. Thanks, Ben. And then before I go and turn it back to Aaron for his presentation, I want to just show you something really quickly. We have our project website up. So I'm just going to share screen here. All right, so you should all be able to see my screen. It says 2050 MTP, Metropolitan Transportation Plan. So this is our public-facing project website that we've been working with AMATS staff on. And we're hoping it's very user-friendly. It's going to be the repository for all the different documents, plans, community engagement, opportunities, interim reports, background paper, just everything you need to know about MTP will be here on this page. We also have links to the official AMATS Municipality of Anchorage page as well. So just a quick tour here at the top. You have about, you have the home, which is this page, it's the landing page, and this is what you'll see. It's a really easy URL, so if you forget, you can just Google AMATS 2050 up here. So pretty easy, and everyone should have access to this now. Everyone with the muni.org or Municipality of Anchorage email should be able to access as well. So just a quick tour here. I think the biggest question AMATS always gets is, what is AMATS? What does it stand for? What do you do? Who do you do it for? And why are you doing it? So we have this on here. You can click for more information. What is an MTP? Why is it required to be updated every 3 to 4 years? And then how can you participate? And then at the bottom, we have a little more information about the process, as well as this awesome picture of Chugach Eagle River, because Chugach Eagle River is included in the AMATS boundary, along with the Anchorage Bowl. So up here is probably the most important tab that you can click on. This is where all the different documents, public review periods, we have one coming up, so this will be updated. MTP resources, including a 101 guide. The previous or current MTP project website is here as well. And then the public participation plan that AMATS has developed, so that if you're curious about how public participation is laid out for all of AMATS projects, we have one specifically for this 2050 update, which I believe the policy committee saw at your last meeting. We also have the guiding principles and vision up here that you also saw at your last meeting, and then the draft goals and objectives. This went to the TAC 2 weeks ago. It's the same goals and objectives you'll see today at the policy committee. And with that, I will turn it back to Aaron. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir.
Pause for a minute. Would you let the record show that Mr. Welton showed up at 1:37? Appreciate it. Welcome, John.
You should be sharing. Okay. Thank you. So, introductions and everything. Can you advance? Or can you click on the PowerPoint itself? There we go. There we go. Okay, quick overview of what we're going to go into today. So we're going to talk about what went into the development of the goals and objectives. We're going to do a brief talk about the goals and maybe some 1 or 2 points on what has changed in the objectives. So just give you kind of a highlight feature, and then we'll talk about next steps. So first thing I want to talk about is this table that you can find in the document that's posted. So this table right here is kind of explaining everything that went into the development of the goals and objectives. So the first column on the left are the 2040 MTP goals and objectives. So that's kind of our starting point. The next column, public comments. Those are public comments from the 2040 MTP that were not addressed as part of that plan and carried forward to this plan. So again, it's kind of our starting point. We're taking those comments and looking at it at its recommended changes. The next column are plan conformance. So anything that's been updated since the last MTP was updated, or new plans. So for example, it's been our corridor plan, the transit on the move plan, et cetera. We also looked back at the climate action plan, the 2040 land use plan, and the comp plans for Anchorage and Eagle River Chugach. Then the next column is the FAST Act. This is our federal side of things, making sure we're in conformance with our requirements there. And then the last column are the recommended 2050 MTP goals and objectives. And you do see on this screen here that we have some we're making changes to, some we're recommending removal of, and it's kind of throughout the document, you'll see that. Okay, so before we begin too much, I just want to remind everyone what is our vision statement for the 2040 MTP, because this is kind of our foundation as we're moving forward. So I'll read it real quick. Anchorage and Chugach Eagle River are vibrant winter communities with an adaptable and efficient multimodal transportation network that is equitable, safe, accessible, and reliable, which supports a sustainable economy, enhances and protects the natural and built environment, and fosters healthy, connected neighborhoods. So you'll see kind of key features of this as we're going through the process. Yes?
Just a quick note, our Deputy Commissioner has joined. 142 was spoken.
Oh, great. Cindy, did you hear that? Deputy Commissioner Polkin's on now.
Yep, I saw her.
Thank you.
Okay. I do want to do a quick reminder of what are goals and objectives, just to help with some confusion that we heard during the TAC. Goals are what do we want to achieve? They tend to be broad, overarching statements. Objectives are how are we going to achieve that? They're a little more specific and measurable. One thing to note about objective is we don't want them so specific as to include things like performance measures and targets into them. So an example of a good objective is reduction of greenhouse gas emissions in your transportation system. It's a little bit specific, it's easy to measure, but it's not so specific. An example of a less than good objective would be reduction of greenhouse gas emissions by 50% by 2027. That is a performance measuring target. That is not what we are doing right now. That is the next steps as we go forward. So just keep in mind that we say specific and measurable, but not so specific as they're being so prescriptive and prevent us from being able to move forward into the next stage. Okay. First one, we have goal 1, preserve the existing system, maintain the transportation infrastructure in a state of good repair. Pretty simple goal. And the only change we really had for this one is adding in the year round to the objective. So we can think about, winter and summer as we're designing the transportation system. Any questions on that one? Next one, goal 2, improve safety. Provide safer and more secure places to live, walk, bike, ride the bus, and drive. So this goal, we did a little more nuanced with it than the last one. The last one was a little too overarching, so we added in these additional things, walk, bike, drive, so people kind of know a little more of what we're talking about. In terms of the objectives themselves, 2 major things. We did add in motorcycles and commercial vehicles because they are an important factor when we're looking at safety. And we modified the objectives to be more inclusive of options such as emergency access or secondary access to help with things with like emergency access. Okay. Goal 3, improve mobility options. So this one we had a pretty significant amount of change to. Support an efficient, reliable, and connected transportation system that allows people to succeed by equitably improving access and mobility to all activities. So this one brings in a lot of that connectivity, mobility, and equity as part of the transportation system. Think of this as equity for opportunity. So giving everyone the ability to access the transportation system for things like education, employment, recreation, kind of the essential aspects of life. And we did also.
I got a question.
Oh, yes.
So I have it here in writing. I'm just curious. I see goal 1 and I see preserve the existing system, and on the left side and on the right side, preserve the existing system. On 3, I have on the left side improving travel conditions, and on the right side, improve mobility options. Are there 2 separate goal 3s?
No, so the left one is what it was for the 2040.
Okay, I got you.
The right one.
Okay.
So this one, yes, thank you for pointing out. We did change the name of this one
Okay, I just want to make sure I'm,
from
I'm
travel
tracking.
options to mobility, because we felt it was more all-encompassing.
got it, thank you.
We also did want to make sure that, as I said, we did change it to mobility to be more inclusive of all travel options and do a much better job of connecting this with the land use.
Could I note for the record that Ms. Zalatel has joined us. She's online now at about 1:46.
Okay, any questions for goal 3? Goal 4, support the economy. This one didn't really change too much. This is develop a transportation system that supports a thriving, sustainable, and broad-based economy. The goal itself didn't change a lot because we felt it kind of matched everything that we were wanting to achieve and helps keep us in compliance with the federal requirements as well as the various plans and studies that we looked at. We did change this a little to call out complete streets and context-sensitive solutions. Again, that's that context for the transportation system as well as just making sure that we're being aware of the land use. And that whatever transportation system we're looking at putting in is aware of the land use and is in context with it. So, okay, are we putting the right type of transportation system for the land use around it? And then we put an emphasis on community investment and land use. So you'll notice a common theme amongst a number of these goals and objectives. Okay, goal 5 had some pretty substantial changes as well. The first thing, we split it into 2 separate goals because it used to have the equity included kind of within it. But during the 2040 MTP development, we did hear some public feedback about how it was getting lost amongst everything else relating to environment. So we split it into 2. The goal 5 is promote a healthy environment, protect, preserve, and enhance the natural environment to promote sustainability and public health. So right away, you'll see one of the biggest changes we added in here is health and how we can integrate that into the transportation process through active transportation. We also refined this to include things about climate change or greenhouse gas impacts. So that does match up with the recently approved authorization bill from the feds that puts more money towards the transportation system and puts a lot more emphasis on things like electric vehicles, which is included in our objective, and also on greenhouse gas emission reductions. Yes?
Is this the one that contains, in a roundabout way, resilience?
It's spread throughout in multiple, but yes, this is one part of resiliency.
Thank you.
Okay, next one, equity. So as we said, we split out the old goal 5 into 2. This is the other one. We want to emphasize equity more in our transportation system, be more upfront about it. It's always been kind of a part of what we do in our planning process, but we felt it was time for us to have a goal calling it out. So we have 3 objectives here. The first one is talking about accessibility for underserved populations for essential aspects of life, kind of similar to what you would see in some of the other goals and objectives, where we're talking about making sure everyone has equitable access to recreation, employment, education, etc. The next objective is dealing with making sure that when we're looking at adverse impacts from transportation projects, that we're being equitable in our approach of how it's distributed amongst the neighborhoods, so that we're not unfairly targeting one neighborhood that might be part of that underserved populations who are more negatively impacted by these projects. And then the last one is one that we've tried to work on and continue to work on, is making sure that we are reducing barriers to public participation by traditionally underserved populations. This is part of our public participation plan, and we felt that it was appropriate for us to have an actual objective in our MTP evaluation. I will say, please note that equity is not just limited to this, it is in multiple other objectives and goals. So, last one, I did want to talk really quickly. We are recommending an entire removal of a goal and objective. It was the old goal 6, which on the sheet you may see it say goal 7. It was quality decision making. So this is things like a benefit cost analysis, making sure your capital expenditures are being the best benefit for the cost, similar to the benefit cost analysis. See, when you talk about it out loud, you're like, wait a minute, that's the same thing. So part of why we want to get rid of it is redundancy, because it's already covered in other goals and objectives. or it's already covered as part of our transportation planning process. So benefit cost analysis is already kind of built into our financial analysis that we have to do with the MTP. And lastly, when we were actually looking at the goals and objectives, or this goal and objective, we realized that a number of the objectives didn't really meet that equitable approach. Benefit cost analysis sounds good, but when you actually think about what it means is right now our traditional benefit cost analysis is cost, AEDT, length of a project. That tends to favor roadway projects over active transportation projects, and we felt it didn't really meet our needs at this point. There is an opportunity for us to develop a benefit cost analysis that does factor in those kind of extra qualities that active transportation projects bring, so health benefits, that kind of stuff. But we're not really at that point right now. So it will be our recommendation as part of the policy section of this plan to start developing a benefit cost tool, similar to what we see in other areas that bring in a lot of this community input on what are the benefits of things like active transportation and how do we quantify those. Okay. Questions, but I did want to, I apologize, it's a little hard to read, but I did want to talk about next steps and kind of where we're at. So right now, we're going to be asking for a 30-day public comment period, a release of these for December. Also, as part of that public comment period is a survey we're wanting to put out for the same period of time. The idea is the survey is another opportunity for people to be able to provide comment. You know, some people find it maybe a little easier to use a survey versus having to go through the traditional way of looking at the comments. And we want to make the survey maybe a little bit easier and quicker for people to look at. Maybe they don't have hours to look at all of the goals and objectives, and they want a kind of quick 30-minute approach to it, similar to what you guys are getting today. So then they can provide their comments on that. So we're going to have that out during December. Once we're done with that, we're going to start working on the performance measures, targets, and project criteria in January. Please note, we are anticipating a work session in January to sit down with the Policy Committee and the Technical Advisory Committee to go over the performance measures, targets, and criteria. That will be based on our goals and objectives. Because what our plan is we're going to get the comments during the public comment period. We're going to review them. We're going to make changes based on where we think it's appropriate and then move forward with it into the performance measures and targets and criteria. So we're not going to bring back the goals and objectives for you guys to review again at this point. But rest assured, you will have plenty of opportunity to be able to see them along the development of the plan, and we can make changes at a later date. Yes?
Real quick, I think I forwarded you the Washington State DOT study on equity assessment.
Yes.
Did you just scan over that and see if there's anything major that we would be missing in our equity comparisons here?
Thank you for reminding me. That was actually one of the things I was going to talk about. So At the TAC, we did receive a number of comments for changes. And one of the things the Technical Advisory Committee did is recommend that the comments that we heard be incorporated as part of our comment response summary. So we did hear about the Washington DOT's equity analysis they did. So I haven't had a chance to look at it yet. I've been focused on this, but it is part of our thing that we have to do and respond to that in our comment response summary. So my goal is to review it and then provide responses on that particular comment. We did hear other comments about making the objectives more including targets. And we did hear a few changes from the chair, Brad Coy, that I have written down in my notes here as well that we are going to integrate. There, wording changes and a few questions he had. So those things will be incorporated into the comment response summary at that point. I just haven't done it yet.
No, and that's fine. It's apples and oranges. Some of the stuff they go into are equitable compensation and property acquisition. I'm not sure that's an area you would focus on necessarily. You're probably more focused on equity of highway construction program investments, right? So where are we putting the resources?
Yeah, and investments is one aspect of equity that we'd be looking at, yes.
Thank you.
So that does include also things like AMATS has a policy in place of percentages towards different modes, like roadway gets the highest, whereas non-motorized gets less. And so that's one of the things to look at is should we be changing those percentages? So it's a lot of different things for equity.
Ms. Zolotel has her hand up for a question.
Ms. Zolotel?
Thank you. So I appreciate the comment that equity, to be overlaid throughout this, but the slide in particular that called out equity, It said for vulnerable populations. Can you tell me where that language comes from and exactly what it means? Because I can see it raising some concerns in the public, just in that that's the one time we are explicitly talking about equity, and that it seems to be, has language that seems to limit it to vulnerable populations.
It's a pretty standard term throughout our industry on what it is. We do actually have a definition of it in the tech memo. I'll try and rattle off everything on my head and make sure I get it all. So generally vulnerable populations are EJ populations, minority populations. We also include age, so anyone under a certain age, so children, for example, or the elderly, and anyone with a disability.
What about income demographics?
Yes, low income is part of the EJ. Sorry, environmental justice populations. Oh, I apologize. I did not turn off my phone. Oh, my bad. So yeah, EJ, environmental justice populations does encompass low income and minority populations.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. If that resource or that definition is available somehow as this goes out for the public comment period, I think it'll be really helpful to get more responsive comments. Thank you.
Yeah, we can go ahead and maybe add it in as like a footnote to the table itself or something, or when I'm still working on how we're going to display the goals and objectives in an easy manner for people to follow, but whatever we display that with, if we have definitions for things, we'll make sure it's included as part of that.
Thank you.
And Meg, you might Google that Washington DOT Equity Assessment 2021 document and just scan through that and see if there's anything you might want to add into it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions? Or are you done, Aaron?
No, I have, sorry,
I'm sorry.
a couple other things to watch out for.
Go ahead.
So next steps, big things to watch out for. The first quarter of 2022 will have a lot of things. So we'll be going through the performance measures targets. And we're hoping to release those. We'll come back before you in February to ask to release for a 30-day public comment period in March. And then we'll have another survey in April that kind of moves us into the next steps of more comments about the criteria itself, as well as starting to identify concerns people have with the transportation system or areas that they'd like to see improvements on. So just a heads up, kind of be on the lookout. With that, I believe I am done.
Okay.
With this.
All right. Any questions or comments from the committee on the MTP? Okay. Any questions or comments from the public on the MTP?
Don't see any hands raised.
None at all. Okay. So what is the will of the committee regarding pushing us out for public notification?
Is it all of December? Is that what we're doing, the 30 days?
Yes, it'll be December 1st through the 31st. So it'll be a little, or somewhere around there.
Is that our motion then move to put out for public hearing in December?
For 30-day public comment.
30-day public comments.
Are you moving? Sure. Okay. All right. It's been motioned. Do we have a second on the motion?
This is Emma. I'll second.
Okay. Moved and seconded.
People to unmute.
Are there any, do we have any objections to approving the motion? Okay, hearing none, the motion is approved. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Okay. Craig, anything on item 6, project plan?
No, sir.
Okay. And we're going to move into item 7 now. I think we had agreed for Mr. Constant's purpose to go ahead and hear item 7D first, the sewer Glen mobility project. Here we go. Welcome. Please say your name and introduce yourself.
Oh my gosh, this thing is trapped in my glasses. I'm sorry.
There you go.
Hi, I'm Kelly Summers. I'm the project manager with the State of Alaska Department of Transportation Facilities for this Seward to Glen Mobility Planning Environmental Linkage Study. And I'd like to thank you for your time today, and thanks for allowing us to come and present to you. I have 2 members of our consultant team from HDR. They're going to walk you through a presentation we have prepared. I'm excited that the AMATS Policy Committee is going to serve as our project's executive committee, and you'll hear about that a little bit later in their presentation. This project is very important to the community, and your involvement is critical to the success of this project. So with that, I will give your attention to Taylor Horn with HDR.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Hi, everyone. Thanks again, Kelly, for that intro. My name's Taylor Horn with HDR. I also have with us Josie Wilson. I am the environmental lead on this project, and Josie is the public involvement lead on this project. So this is about a 10-minute overview of kind of the basics of the project. So this corridor has been studied for quite a while in Anchorage, as you'll see, as illustrated by this slide here. And I think probably most noticeably and perhaps in folks' mind is this item here in 2009, the Highway to Highway project, which was an environmental impact statement that did not go through the full process. And then after that, once that was stopped, the concept remained in the MTP, in the 2035 MTP, the interim 2035 MTP. And so the project we're working on and speaking to you today is here along the bottom, the number 129 out of the 2040 MTB and MTP, the Seward Highway to Glen Highway Connection Planning and Environmental Linkages Study, 20th Avenue, Chester Creek to Airport Heights. That shouldn't say road. So to kind of give everyone an idea of where we're talking about, outlined in red here is the general study area that we're talking about with the Seward Glen Mobility PEL study. A quick aside about the branding name of this project. I just read the official MTP language, so the real name of the project. The project team chose to have a kind of public-facing name that is the Seward Glen Mobility PEL study, and the idea was to not necessarily presuppose that the outcomes of this project are going to be, you know, a highway connection, and to have this concept of mobility that we're looking at. All options are on the table, very similar to the prior presentation that spoke about mobility there. So that was the aside about the name. So the study description specifically excerpted here is to identify and evaluate options to improve transportation mobility, safety, access, and connectivity between the Seward Highway near 20th Avenue and the Glen Highway east of Airport Heights. The project will also identify ways to improve access to and from the Port of Alaska to the highway network there. So in general, the focus area of the study has the Chester Creek Belt to the south, Burgaw to the east, to the west, basically the AC couplet and that part of downtown, and north bordered by J-Bear and including the Port of Alaska and also up on the hill, Government Hill. So quick elevator speech about what a planning environmental linkage study is. The concept kind of grew out over the past, since the transportation bill about 15 years ago from the Federal Highway Administration, to look for ways to speed up the environmental process that occurs during normal federally funded transportation projects by being able to do things during the planning phase of a federally funded transportation project and be able to carry them through and use them again during NEPA, which is the National Environmental Policy Act. Basically, it's an umbrella concept of laws that cover both environmental, social, and public outreach during a federally funded transportation project. And the idea is if you can go through a process and meet the public notice and involvement goals and requirements of NEPA for certain products that you develop during a planning process, you can use them during any construction projects that happen to come out of that plan. And that's what the goal of this project is in a nutshell. So I'm going to ask Josie to speak to the committees for this project.
So as you probably heard Taylor say probably 5-6 times, public outreach, public participation, public involvement. That is a critical component of any PEL or PEL. We discussed when we were like, how do we make sure and maximize the engagement? Well, we have done one thing. This is only one of about 20 different public outreach and public involvement things we're going to do for this project. And one of those is establish committees. And as many of you have either served on committees or formed committees, you're like, we want to have everybody have a say on these committees. Well, you can imagine if you start thinking about all the subject matter experts, all the people that need to get involved, all the people you want to talk to, next thing you know, your committee turns into 100 or more people, and that's not even enough, even that. So what we did is instead of one committee, that some of you are familiar with the term like stakeholder advisory group or things like that, we didn't want to call it one committee, so we created 4 committees, not 1 but 4. So we have a community advisory committee, we have a technical advisory committee, we have an agency and tribal committee, and we have executive committee. Thank you very much for serving as our executive committee. Thank you for that. So each one of these committees has a different purpose, a different kind of how we're going to talk with them and engage them. But for the most part, they all have an advisory capacity, except this particular committee, our executive committee. You have more governance and decision-making authority, whereas the other groups have more input authority. If you'd like to know, again, we committed to making this presentation fairly short today, but if you'd like to know any more information about any of these, all of this is on the website, and that website is sewardglenmobility.com. sewardglenmobility.com. The very last slide of this, which will be in your packets as well, in your minutes, is on there as well, but it's Seward Glen Mobility. We have a committee page, and you can go to that and read all about the committees. But we wanted to spend just a smidge of time today talking about the executive committee. So Christine, if you wouldn't mind pulling up that charter. So the first question everybody asks when I say, hey, Wolfgang, will you serve on this executive committee? He's going to say, Josie, what's the time commitment? What's the purpose? What are you going to need from me? I need to know this. So we have created a charter document that is also part of your packets that you can look at as well. And I'm going to walk up to the screen, and for those of you in the room, and I'm just going to do a quick high-level flyover of this. So you've got your purpose to provide guidance, advice, and decision-making throughout the Pell study at key decision points. So this is, unfortunately for some of you, this is not the first time you will see me. The last time you will see me. You will be seeing me many more times as we need to have you make decisions. Your activities, duties, and responsibilities, you're going to help provide input and advise the project leadership team. You will also be, kind of the liaisons for your respective groups and departments. So I'm just going to take a moment to shout out to Chris Constant. I think, Chris, you're on the phone. Chris has been a gem and helping to do this exact role of providing input, advising, and being a liaison. So a big thanks to you, Chris. You've been awesome. And so we have approximately, Wolfgang wants to know how many meetings. We have approximately 6 meetings anticipated during the project between October 21 and April 24. So that may change a little bit, but that's kind of what we're asking of you. 6 times we'll come here, discuss with you, and get your input on things. We are committed to making sure you're briefed during the project, helping you to give us the direction on behalf of whatever organization you're representing. Keep your respective group, department, agency, organization informed, and participate as a cooperating team. You are the steering committee for this project and this Pell study, and you are decision making, and then the membership is made up. So the question I get a lot is, who makes up the executive committee, and why are they the executive committee, and how do I get on that executive committee? Well, this is the composition. What's cool about this charter, and then it scroll down a little bit further, and it has communication, leadership, and communication. Kelly serves as our project manager, and Leader is chairperson of the executive committee, but of course, we welcome all of your input. And communication is primarily email, phone calls, and these meetings. So hopefully that answers some of your questions, but going back to the presentation and the committees, I'm sure some of you may have some questions about that I want to anticipate and offer some information. The first thing is, we have met with every committee, and with today's meeting, we have met with all of our committees to get it started, kind of kick us off. So we have met with all 4 committees now, the community advisory, the technical advisory, agency, and tribal, and we have received some great ideas and input. In fact, based on, I don't know if you guys know Alan Kemplin, or know some of our folks on our community advisory committee, they suggested additional folks that we have added based on that community advisory recommendation. So if you see Alan, tell him thank you. We've met with SJ Klein, who's also very involved, and so we've been getting great feedback from folks on getting these committees established and ideas, so really great. If you're curious about those meetings, I'm sure, John, you are such a guru when it comes to, meeting minutes and reading those minutes. All of the minutes are going to be from these meetings are going to be on the website shortly. Right now, we've committed to sending all of the minutes to the people on the committees, and they're reviewing those and then getting them back to us, any changes or edits, and then we'll publish them. So as Aaron likes to say, transparency is a key to all public input, right? And so we are committed to being transparent throughout this process. So all of those minutes will be available on the website, if not today, tomorrow. Okay, so a couple other questions you might want to know. This is only one tactic to engage the public. This doesn't represent everything that we're going to do. I wanted to hit the highlights, but one of the things we are going to do is we are also going to have kind of a community kickoff public meeting to introduce the project and let everybody know what's happening and to encourage people to participate. And that meeting is going to be January 27th. And it's going to be 4:30 to 6:30. And I purposely put it at 4:30 because I think there's an AMATS policy committee that ends at 3:30. So, so January 27th, tomorrow, many of you that we have your emails for and that are serving on this committee because you are executive committee are going to receive an email, which we call an e-blast from us, kind of a save the date and to kind of get people excited. We're working on a newsletter. We're working on all kinds of things. And we have it, Aaron will love this, we have a designated environmental justice equity communication plan.
Perfect.
So we are really committed to transparency, engaging the right people, talking to the right people. We're just getting started, so please be patient with me. Just getting started. And a public meeting, we will make sure all of you know about this, and then anybody who can participate, we can promote it. We'd love to have your help, executive committee. Christine, we'd love to have your help getting the word out about our public meeting. More information will be coming on that. Okay. If you do have any questions, if you have any questions about public outreach or the committees or anything like that, you are so welcome to email us. The email is kind of a joint email that you'll get Kelly, Josie, Taylor, John, you'll get all of us, one email, kind of like Lord of the Rings, one ring to rule them all. One email, it's info@sewerglenmobility.com. Info@sewerglenmobility.com, and that will go to all of us and you'll get a response. At this time, I'm going to turn it back to Taylor to kind of walk through the rest of the presentation.
I'll be brief. Thank you very much, by the way. I'll be real brief. One last thing I wanted to hit on this slide is those specific items that we're going to be asking and bringing forward. The decisions for this body are listed here in the final bullet. So that would be the purpose and need statement, the criteria that we're going to use to screen alternatives, the results of those screenings, the selection of a recommended alternative, and then finally the Pell study report that ends the project. So quickly, what's the overall timeline? We got started over the summer doing background data collection. Right now we're in that phase 2 to identify problems, and what's going to happen is part of that thing, Josie. Part of that process is the first public meeting wherein we will ask members of the public to identify what are the problems in the corridor, moving on to feeding that into the purpose and needs statement and identifying how we're going to evaluate the alternatives. And then by next summer, we're going to be developing the range of alternatives, beginning the screening process. As you'll see, there are, at each of these major steps, the top line, the AC, means those are the advisory committee meetings, and that lower line are the 4 different public meetings that are planned during this project. And I will briefly go over what we've done so far. Like I said, we've been doing traffic baseline data gathering over the summer, coming up with the environmental setting, because this all feeds into a environmental document that then all that information is going to be presented to the advisory committees and also the public during the first public meeting that's going to happen in Q1. There's also a traffic modeling effort going on to establish kind of the baseline movement of traffic. And then as we move into the spring of late winter and spring of next year, we'll take the create a purpose and need statement and also start looking at what we'll look at for alternative screening criteria for alternatives. So I'm going to, that's the end of our presentation. Just mention real quick, there's the link for the website that we're trying to be very mindful of keeping that updated on the latest that's going on with the project. And there's a link to the that email that Josie mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? Go ahead, Joe.
I got one as a comment. You mentioned Alan Kemplin. I think he was involved with that first one in 1963 as well. And everyone said, pass it on to him. You know, you have the agency and tribal committee. And I guess who's on there? Agencies seem pretty obvious. The tribal stuff can be tricky, who to include, and we're trying to coordinate with include and it's tricky to get them involved. So I mean, you met with them and they're on board, and who are they?
So if you are interested, John, I will happily connect with you offline so I can talk with you a little bit about the relationships. But all of the people that are on these committees are listed on our website, so you can actually see. We focused on the tribes that have kind of jurisdiction in the project area. So we didn't include everybody, we just included a few. And what we did is we did one-on-one phone calls with those folks to see if they were interested and available, and to engage them. So good. And then, of course, inviting them to the committee meetings and any other ways that they'd like to engage at their convenience.
All right, thanks. Kind of go one more and then.
Yeah.
So how does this fit with the Midtown Congestion Relief PEL?
I'm going to go back to the slide for the project area. It fits in right above, basically. That the Midtown Congestion Relief ended essentially, let's let go of this. Here we go. Seward Highway at the bottom of Chester Creek. And so this is heading up the hill and that direction. And so the idea is that is now an existing plan, essentially. So the preferred alternative the recommended alternative that was identified during that plan would be assumed to be part of the future condition. And we would look at that as kind of incoming data.
Okay, that's it. Geographically, I had it. So is there any implication on timing, having done that first and then this one second? Could this project end up being done before the Midtown?
By projects, do you mean the construction, like the design and construction of projects ultimately? I don't think there's nothing that is dictating the timing of programming any results that come out of a PEL study. So what I mean by that is, this goes through a planning process and then we get either into an MTP or the STIP. So I think that there's nothing dictating which one comes before or after. And part of a PEL study process is identifying implementation. And that can be staged implementation also. So you can look at what's existing in the plans and say, well, it makes sense to fit this component in here, invite in, and take that into consideration when doing that. And which is a part of our scope of work, is to look at implementation of the recommended alternative out of this study.
Thanks. Follow up on that a moment. Sorry.
No, you're fine.
So when does this study go stale?
Stale's a
That's a technical term.
Yeah. So there is a provision in the statutes that set up a PEL study that talk about a 5-year limit, but in practice that just means you have 5 years to directly incorporate the products that have been made during a PEL process into that subsequent NEPA and design process of a construction project. Guidance that the Federal Highway Administration has given kind of broadly is that doesn't mean you have to throw away the whole study and the products after 5 years. That means you have to look at it and look for changed conditions. You might have to do a memo and update, that sort of thing. So there's no definite stale date. It is, it depends based on the change of conditions out there.
Okay, good, thank you.
Yep.
Thanks. Can you go back to your first, that one right there? Okay.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's fine. So am I correct? This has been studied for 60 years? 63 to, let's just round.
So this
4,
is the
5,
concept.
6, almost 60 years we've been talking about this.
Of connecting the
Yeah.
highways.
So is there any reason to believe that now it's gonna happen? Like, we're doing this Pell, right, PL? We're doing this Pell, right, and it's being funded. I'm assuming this is not the first go around for something like this. Well, clearly. So what I'm wondering is there confidence that now that this is the start, that it's gonna happen? Or can we assume it's gonna get derailed and in 2063 we won't be here, but somebody will be here talking about the history of this project?
I think this lays out a vision for a corridor.
Has that ever been done before? I'm trying to understand the history. This is my first time on AMATS, so I'm trying to understand the history here. Has there ever been a vision prior to now?
Oh, I think, so this is the first planning environmental linkage process.
Okay.
And this is a list of not only plans that have focused on making that highway connection, but also the long-range plans and the MTPs that have included that idea in it. What I can say is novel about this effort is this is a tool that's being applied to a corridor, particularly the connection bit. So like this has looked at, highway to highway looked at options that went far east of town. It was a pretty wide area. This is the first effort that is using a tool that is geared by regulations and statute to move that from planning into implementation, and has that's why it was created.
So this what we're doing now, I should say what you're doing now, has never been done.
The planning environmental linkage study has not been done on this section. Midtown, the one that happened recently, was part of this, a corridor, but we are looking at making the turn to connect,
Okay.
But part of, like I said before, there's this piece of this that is what's the plan to implement, design and implement, get this thing funded.
So this is like a plan for the plan.
A component of the process.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Yes, John.
Can I go? Is there anyone else in the queue?
Ms. Zalato has her hand raised as well, so.
Ms. Alto?
Thank you. So my question, being intimately acquainted with the Midtown Pell that happened, is I didn't see how those work groups were going to braid in with the affected community council areas. Could you talk a little bit about that and how that interaction?
Yes,
is?
yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Zelata. I really appreciate your question. I probably should have hit that, so I'm glad that you brought it up. So all of the community councils that are in the area are serving in one of the committees one way or another. I am also, we have scope as well to engage with the community councils individually. So we've got 2/3 different ways to make sure the community councils are engaged into this process. If you may have some specific suggestions or ideas of what you'd like to see, please don't hesitate to email me or contact me offline, because I want to engage them in an appropriate way that they feel like they're being heard and their input is involved. At the same time, I don't want to be showing up at every community council to talk about this if that's not helpful to them. So if you look on the website under committees, you'll see the councils that are actually serving on the community advisory committees. And we've met with them. We met with Airport Heights, and we've met with Fairview, and we've met with Downtown, and we've met with, there's 3 or 4 others that I'm forgetting off the top of my head that are part of the committees. And then we are also going to be engaging with the councils directly. Did that answer your question? And also say, I'm happy to, if you have ideas and what you'd like to see, I'm happy to work with you on that and get your ideas.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I would just say that a lot of community councils with projects this big happening in their areas create their own committees. So may want to query them to see if they do plan to make their own committees. I saw that with the Midtown one in particular. And then just to put it on your radar, they won't need regular updates, but occasional updates, or Midtown community councils are still getting updates on the Pell, the projects as they move from that contractor. Any significant dates where, since the 2 projects, while independent, are part of an entire corridor, it might be just something to give some thought to. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for that idea and suggestion. That's actually really helpful and insightful, so thank you so much.
Any other questions? Mr. Littleton?
You know, one thing, and this is something that Wolfgang had pointed out and brought in the view is, you know, this is so significant. This with the Midtown thing, with where people drive and why. And I know you're doing the destination study and so on. But Wolfgang had kind of pointed out, this will draw people off of Muldoon Road and Tudor Road. That's not really quite in your area, I don't think. But it's at least for me, it's interesting because we have troubles on Tudor, right? We've had people killed crossing the street there and going to the school recently, just all a variety of things. And, you know, to justify this project, you can say, okay, what it does is solves other problems elsewhere. It's hard to say, now look at the whole city, right? To say that, but that's really an important piece, you know, that, so I don't know how you'll integrate that. Maybe that'll jump out when you do your destination study and you see, geez, all these people are going up Muldoon Road. If we do this project, it'll pull X number away. And I don't know that you have quantitative stuff on that. Or is it just like, you were just kind of your experience?
There were traffic studies that backed the Midtown, and similarly, those traffic studies will feed into this.
Absolutely, and above and beyond that, and Mr. Littleton, you got to the answer I was going to give you is that those origin and destination studies, the traffic studies that I showed are ongoing right now. They are not just focusing on that outlined area. The study area we showed on the screen is just to give people an idea of where we're really looking at the actual, you know, problem area. But the traffic origin and destination study and travel demand modeling is an outgrowth of the AMATS model. We're updating it and looking at travel exactly on those routes. So we have a team that's working on that, and we'll look at the different zones where people are traveling from, and part of the products that will come out of that we'll be bringing before you all to take a look at.
Okay, good, thank you.
Yeah, one just follow-up. Can you tell me the main reason why this has never happened? Why has there never been a highway to highway? What's been the resistance? Has it been funding? Has it been there's no desire for it?
Well, there was one in 2009, the original effort.
No. I mean, like, why hasn't it? I feel like construction's never been. Oh, it's like it's consistently been studied, but we've never gone past the study moment, the study phase. I'm just curious, what's been the holdup? Why hasn't it happened?
So we as a project team asked the same question, like, why haven't we fixed this problem?
Yeah.
And the answer is it's actually more complex than just simply going in and doing something.
Mm-hmm.
Just in the community advisory meetings, we have people that are like, do this, and then other people that are like, don't do that.
Right.
So it's a lot more complex than I think anyone, even though we have lots of good data and studies. I wouldn't say that these are all those studies in that list is like doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. It's more about there's a lot of data that we're going to be able to use to actually move the project forward. So it's very complex and nuanced, and there's a lot of different, if you ask 11 people why this hasn't been solved, you're going to get 40 different answers, not just 11 different answers.
Sure, yeah.
So what we're excited about is that this process will come up with hopefully some recommendations that can be actionable that are also supported by the community. So we're very optimistic that this process is different than all the other processes that have been done before. And because it's NEPA compliant, it can be used to expedite some of those projects. So I'm happy to talk with you more about that, and I'm sure Wolfgang would love to talk with you more about that too, because everybody wants to solve it. It's not a simple fix, otherwise it would have been.
No, I'm not claiming that it's a simple fix. I'm just curious what the main,
Yeah.
what the impediments were, and I think it'd be important to identify what those consistent impediments are to possibly avoid them or deal with them early on, so that we're not, like I said, in 2063 sitting here talking about a highway to highway. That's all.
Can I answer his question?
Yeah,
sure.
They have to be sensible or something, but you know, my experience, because I've been tracking this for many years, not as long as Alan Kemplin, but he started when he was 6, 4 then, but you know, part of it is money, because the city's AMATS allocation is what, 30 million, give or take, and not even close to the billion this is going to take. And even the state, you're talking a huge amount of the state's federal funds to do this. Is this the most important thing? So it's, one is opportunity cost. What else can we do? And that's why I asked about things like, we really need to justify what does it solve in other areas instead of just moving more cars faster through this corridor. Because if it was only that, I'm not that interested. Because if you look, what is the benefit for Anchorage? For people in Wasilla to get to Kenai quicker? Heck with them. I'm not gonna use my road money for that. Okay, the state might, because that's your broader goal, but I have less interest in that. But if it is pulling off too much traffic from other parts of town where we can have, I don't really want to say sacrifice this area, but focus on this area and quiet down traffic in other places and get people where they want to go more efficiently and safely. That's what I want to see this do. And I didn't see it so much in previous iterations. I mean, some of that I gotta admit, I mean, I know more now than I did 8-9 years ago with that H2H. And so that's part of it too. We all learn more, but that's it. Opportunity cost and lack of money and opportunity cost for what we have.
Any other questions?
I'll think more.
Any questions from the committee on the phone? Chris Constance, any questions? Okay, any questions or comments from the public? And Christine, let me know if there's somebody online. Okay, thank you so much for that presentation. Really appreciate it. Good work. Looking forward to being part of that executive committee that I didn't know about.
Congratulations.
Okay, we're gonna jump to 7A, back to 7A, correct? Does that sound right? Okay, Northern Lights Minnesota Boulevard. Minnesota, that's right. Northern Lights Boulevard, Minnesota Drive to Seward Highway. And the infamous Sean Baskey.
Indeed.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Sean Baskey, project manager with the Department of Transportation on this project and a couple other ones, but this one is the interesting one today. So Northern Lights, Minnesota Drive to the Seward Highway. Really, this is focused on non-motorized active transportation sidewalk repair. With me today, I've also got Travis Holmes, who's my project engineer at the Department of Transportation, and then Dave Gamez, who's our consultant with Lounsbury, who's doing the design on the project. So project purpose is basically to improve the non-motorized facilities throughout the corridor. Overall schedule for the project, we're looking at environmental document completion early next year. Final design will be ongoing until we get to construction. And really that depends upon the scope of the project, which is why we're here. The purpose of this presentation is really to identify that we have not enough funding to solve all the problems in the corridor. And so we're trying to get comments to try to justify the scope of the project and what it is that we want to do in the overall corridor. So in the tip, it was identified with $800,000 in construction funding. Very shortly, you'll find out that that is hardly enough money to do anything in the corridor. There's way more needs than there is funding. So we either need to manage the expectations that we're not going to get much, or we need more funding. Let's just go over the existing conditions. I'll go over it very quickly. There's a lot of problems. This was originally constructed in 1975, 4 to 5 foot wide sidewalks. When we're talking about overall desirable widths of facilities, we're talking about 8 foot, 10 foot for bicycles, pedestrians, and other things. When we're looking at other corridors, like Spinard Road corridor is one of my other projects, and we're looking at hopefully doing 8 foot wide sidewalks, right, which has space for a lot more. Lots of traffic, lots of other things going on, and we did a pavement preservation project back in 2015 on Northern Lights for the road surface, which we went in and replaced a bunch of the curb ramps at all of the major intersections. Sidewalks are in terrible condition, lots of issues. There are a ton of driveways along Northern Lights, and many of them, if not most of them, don't meet ADA compliance. Basically, they're 2 too steep from one side to the other. So if you were trying to take a wheelchair down the sidewalk, you'd be tipped into the traffic lane, right, adjacent to you. There's a lot of utilities also in the corridor that make it not ADA compliant. We've got hydrants and other utilities right in the middle of the sidewalk, you know, for utility poles and things like that. Storm drains, junction boxes for different utilities. So I'll skip over to the map that you have in front of you. And really, that kind of tells the tale. Yeah. And so as we're pulling that up, so there's a couple different colors going on this thing, and you'll see that it is blanketed with color. Color is not good in general in this. And so yellow lines denote, or orange lines on the screen, denote things that are not ADA compliant. And so virtually most of the corridor is not ADA compliant from a sidewalk perspective. If you look at the dots, the cyan dots, or on your page, the dark blue dots are the non-compliant driveways. So basically they're pitched too steep from one side to the other. And so those will require replacement. And then the green dots on there are the ones that are okay. The green dots are the ones that you might consider for removal to try to address, you know, there may not be a need for all the access onto some of these facilities. So if you might notice that like one property in particular might have like 7 driveways going into it, whereas they might not need 7 driveways to go onto one property. So maybe some opportunities there. Each of the utilities and luminaires has a symbol there if it's impeding the traveling public from walking down the sidewalk. So lots of opportunities to remove or move facilities to make things better. So as you can see, from one end to the other, we've got problems. Yeah, let's go back to the overall presentation. And, you know, really, you'll see here that basically we've got a lot of things that we can do, right? But everything that we're talking about right here is just improving what's there. It's not talking about expanding any of the facilities. So let's just get that straight before we hop into overall costs. So we're not making the dream scenario of a much wider sidewalk or anything like that. We're just talking about improving what's in place. So we'll just hop right into the costs. Just to do the sidewalk repairs for the south side of the road, that would cost us $900,000 plus or minus. These are super rough estimates, rough order of magnitude estimates. I cannot deliver you a project that would be $900,000. This is pure construction costs, not including, you know, anything else that we might have to do. North side, $800,000. Driveway repairs, north side, $1 million. South side, $400,000. Utility relocations, grand total of $1.1 million. Very quickly, we exceed the project's budget in mass. So from the get-go, when Travis and I received the project, it was all about expectation management. Don't go out and spend a bunch of money doing a bunch of work before we nailed down what the scope was. And so we've tried to minimally spend money, trying to identify the problems and bring it forward so that way we can identify what it is that we want to do. So we've got looks at different alternatives. We can mix and match 100 different ways. These are just a couple of them. We can do things only on the south side. We can do things on the north side. We can whack them all in.
Real quick question. When you say repairs on that slide, are you really talking about bringing them up to ADA standards?
Correct.
Is that what the correlations? Okay. Thank you.
There we go.
So total 4.1 and you've got 800?
Somewhere in that neighborhood. And that's rough order of magnitude. You could, 2 to 3 years from now, depending on cost escalations that are happening all over the place right now, it could be well.
That's fine. And are there any right-of-way acquisition pieces to that, or is that all within their existing right-of-way?
So all of the features that you see here are within the existing right-of-way. The problem becomes as soon as we start doing driveway repairs and things like that, we might need interest from the adjacent property owners. And so every driveway, I'd need to go and talk to the property owner, get, something signed with them to go on their property, potentially redo parking and other things, because the regrading would have to go well back onto each one of the properties.
Help me understand the process and how we got to this. How was this project identified? I'm assuming it's through the AMATS process. But the money that you do have, the 800,000, who came up with the 800,000? How did that money get there? Which I think most people could see that just on a cursor. I'm not an engineer, but I could see that just looking at this, it would be more than 800,000. So how did that money get there? How did that get allocated to that? Who came up with that amount?
I don't
Why
know if
that
anybody,
amount? And why
I don't
that?
know if anybody in this room might have that answer. Certainly from the project development side, we identified an issue once we'd received the project. I could go back and talk to others with regards.
I asked the same question.
You did?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
These
just,
these planning estimates are real key in this because
Yeah.
otherwise we run into this problem where we're.
I'm just wondering why are we here with this when it just seems on a common sense would say that's way more than 800. Yeah.
Do an answer?
Aaron, you'll get an AMATS planner. So when we built the tip, this project is not actually specifically called out of the tip. What we did is we put a preservation project into the tip. So similar to what you have in the pavement preservation, we did one for non-motorized because we recognize there's a lot of places around town that need this kind of help.
Yep.
So we put like a catch-all in there. And we assigned money based on the information we had available at the time. So my recollection is this particular one was not something we had thought about at the time. So we didn't sit there and say, oh, this is only going to cost $800,000. I can tell you that is not what we would have put in there if we had known about this at that time. It was just what we had available when we built the tip.
I understand. Is there a follow-up?
I'm a contractor, and you can build this in cheaper. You can build this within budget in a way if you optimize traffic. And but my question is, why don't we do this with the adjacent asphalt reclamation? Because that will bring the total project cost down significantly.
Ray, we can get that once we get to public comment, but right now we're just going to hear policy committee comments for now, if you would, please. Okay, so go ahead.
Yeah, just a quick follow-up. From a process standpoint, again, if we say we have $800,000, can we change and say, you know what, let's find a project that's more reasonable for that money, or are we stuck with this now because we've made it to this point?
Sure. Craig could probably cover the other side, but from the project standpoint, we're still working on the environmental document. And so, if a no build selection was made, then we'd likely be reimbursable for all of our costs.
Also, we'd have to cancel the project or not do recommended.
We've got to follow through.
We'd have to follow through the process in order to not have to pay the money back.
Yeah, and again, as Aaron said, this project was listed as a pavement preservation for non-motorized facilities. So it wasn't really saying we're doing this West Northern Lights project. There's an opportunity. We have a couple of possibilities to add additional funding to it, either through some of those COVID relief funds that we have, the CRISA funds, or some of the projects that are in the current tip that didn't quite take as much money as we expected, and some projects that might slip. So there is an opportunity to add funds to this project. We're not at a place where we're sitting here, 800 is all we have. We can, I mean, that's kind of what Mr. Baskey is saying is where we are right now is you budget 800,000 for some sort of pavement replacement. That's not going to do what we really need to do. And so if you folks are interested in talking about the possibility of saying, give us a good idea of what it costs, and then AMATS staff, we can come up and figure out how much is actually there and what we can go forward with.
It's important to note too that I think Oregon was penalized quite heavily for lack of corrective actions to ADA compliant facilities to the point where the Federal Highway Administration came in and forced over at quite a large additional percentage of their program that had to be allocated only to ADA related things. So in other words, you wouldn't want to ignore it.
Yeah.
Important to pay attention.
And we don't have, right now in the AMATS, in programming, we say that we're going to allocate between 10 and 15% of our total allocation to non-motorized type projects.
Okay.
And so we don't have one that says ADA compliance right now. Yeah, so right now.
So that was a question I had. Now that it's been identified that so much of Northern Lights isn't ADA compliant, is there some sort of obligation that kicks in to fix it since it's been identified as grossly out of compliance?
Yeah, as far as I know, there isn't from the AMAT standpoint, but there may be from whoever owns the facility.
Yeah. Todd, do you know what the requirement is for stewardship on the ADA oversight?
So we've got ADA transition plans at the high level, right? You know, or trying to address non-compliance, right? And so those have project or program wide looks at things. So this would just go into that. The Department of Transportation has sent out interns to go and basically document every single curb ramp intersection in the entire city of Anchorage, right? We know where all of our non-compliance is at specific curb ramps, right? And that's what we're driven to have to replace when we're doing normal pavement preservation projects on the roadways.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
And keep in mind too, your formula funds will most likely increase as a result of the formula fund increases. So that'll be additional opportunities to apply new funding.
Okay.
So I think staff could get there.
Okay.
Any other questions, Mr. Whittleton?
Yeah, it seems like forever ago, but I walked this sort of with Ann Brooks did a thing, might have been predecessor. Kevin Jackson was there, who's, for a guy in a wheelchair, is amazingly mobile, but certainly check with him. But my recollection from that was it was the stuff right in the middle of the sidewalk that was really the deal killer. It's like, he could deal with the slants and the bumps and the cracks, but when you've got a pole right there, where do you go? You end up in the street, So is that, but do you have, so an alternative, when you move that pole, or can you go around it? And you might go on private property, is that just can't happen?
Yeah, so it would be dependent on the specific situation, right? So let's just say we've got overhead utility poles carrying overhead wire, right? And so there's an alignment associated with those. And so as soon as you start addressing one, then you're out of alignment in the pole line. So then it starts having this cascade effect down the line. If we're just talking about a luminaire, right? One of the lights sitting off the side that light the road, then, that's an easier fix where you might be able to just move that to the back of the sidewalk or pathway. You might have to buy additional right of way for that space for it. But it's still expensive.
Can you go around those power lines then, or the power poles?
So to provide the minimum space, 3 to 4 feet, I think it's 4 feet wide, ADA facility, we would potentially have to buy right of way onto the private property and reroute it around it if we were to go with, that type of application for that specific situation.
Have we done that in Anchorage?
I would say that engineers use a lot of tools, and you might not notice that we divert around big utilities, but we do to try to reduce costs of our projects for sure.
All right, thanks.
Has there been any consideration to working with utilities? They've got undergrounding funds and plans. Is there any attempt to coordinate with utilities on utilizing their funds in conjunction with undergrounding some of these?
We have not engaged in that. We are at a very preliminary.
Okay.
That is, we certainly can.
Okay. Any other questions from the committee?
Yes,
Salt?
please.
Oh, yes, go ahead.
Thanks. So I'm wondering if this project can be looked at in the context of kind of other projects in the area coming up. It feels like it's an extensive standalone project, a very important one. The disability lawyer in me is like, ooh, ADA compliance, better get that done quick. But what I don't get with this project is how it fits into the overall vision for the area and the corridor as a general matter. It's my understanding that, you know, there are probably some other planned projects in this area, and I'd hate to see work done, especially at this cost, if there are other things that are forthcoming. I didn't know if that investigation's been done at all.
So I believe there's at least one project in the LRTP for, you know, reworking Northern Lights. Given that the Department of Transportation just resurfaced Northern Lights in 2015, you know, we'd expect at least a few more years out of it. But typical for us, a reconstruction project or rehabilitation of this entire corridor, you know, I don't even want to throw a number out there for that. I mean, it is astronomically expensive. And certainly it does need it at some point in time. We can't just continue resurfacing the roadway for that, but it's
I appreciate that. It seems like it would make sense if we can think about how we can sync these projects with sync, like get in sync with these projects and in other areas. That's the only suggestion or something to maybe think about. Maybe not even with this particular project, just as a general matter when we're thinking about sequencing. Thank you.
Deputy Commissioner Polkin, any questions from you?
No, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions from the committee members? Any questions from the public on this matter? I know there was one earlier.
Yeah, my question had been along the lines of ladies who just spoke about the syncing and basically having a calendar. I'm sure they do. I just would wonder what it was, because also if we have a limited pot of money from a like form work perspective and how you do that job, if you do the sidewalk at the same time as the adjacent asphalt reclamation, you add a lot less money to the job, and so we can spread the money further. That's it.
Thank you for your comment. Can you please give us your name?
Robert Bravo. I think I'm a participant here.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you for the comment too. All right.
A hand raised from Mr. Rudolph from Transit.
Mr. Rudolph from Transit. Oh, Bart, you there?
If you're speaking, you're on mute. If you're not speaking, maybe you're there.
Thank you. Yes, this is Bart Rudolph, Public Transportation Department. I would just like to make a comment depending on what you decide with this project. Our bus stops are on the north side of Northern Lights, so if you are going to do just part, I would strongly recommend focusing on the north side. Some of them are our most used bus stops. We're averaging 100 people a day using one bus stop on and off. So there is significant pedestrian traffic on the north side. And these facilities are woefully inadequate, as you can imagine. And if you've tried to walk them, just not once on a field visit, but on multiple days, every day, it's incredibly difficult. It gives a strong feeling of unsafe. Vision Zero identifies this corridor as a high crash corridor for all three user groups, pedestrians, bicycles, and vehicles. So obviously, would strongly recommend funding this at the highest level to get some of this work done. But I think to Ms. Zolotel's point, the vision in the MTP is to 3-lane this section and add the appropriate adequate sidewalks that are needed. It's a much larger project, but I really think that that should be expedited. And if you don't fund this completely, maybe you can start on the data and the engineering for that project, because I know that there are significant questions from DOT and the like on whether or not that's feasible, but that is the real solution here. So I hope that this project doesn't get just spot funded, because I think it is, if you want to talk about equity in transportation planning and putting it into action, this is it. If this were a road project that was underscoped and underfunded, it would have come back to AMATS to get more money. I point to O'Malley Road as the prime example for that. But yeah, so that's my 2 cents. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Bart. Any other questions from the public or comments? The only last comment I guess I would make is there's at least, this must be a really old aerial photo because there's a lot of stuff that just doesn't, like the Northern Lights and that thing was torn down like 10 years ago. So if your assessment was based on an aerial review, isn't it?
No, we had people in the field walking every inch.
Oh, okay, so maybe updated aerial photography.
You know, I just want to clarify for the first speaker here. Now, he talked about tying this in with the pavement replacement project, but that was already done. I think the confusion is that we're calling this, is that right? Or is there a pavement replacement coming again?
No.
So the Department of Transportation has its own program for replacing, you know, the pavement on these facilities. I'd say that, you know, we are well behind on nearly all of our, you know, our system on pavement preservation stuff. And so I would say there's not one on the books at this moment, which means you're at least 3 to 4 years out.
Right.
If
I
not
thought you
more.
said you just did one.
We did one in
2015,
2015, yeah.
2015, okay. So I think it was our phrasing made the speaker think that that was imminent.
Sure.
That's not quite right. All right, thanks.
Okay. Is that all you had, Sean?
Yep.
Any other last minute comments? Okay, thank you very much for the presentation. Okay, general item information 7B, Chugach Way study. Who would be presenting on that?
Hi, this is Laquita with Dal. I'll be presenting.
Laquita, why don't you go ahead?
Hi. I'm gonna share my screen here. So I'm going to give you just a brief update on what we've been doing on the Chugach Way area transportation element study. And so at the beginning of the project, we came up with a project vision, which has been our guide throughout the project, and it is to identify roadway improvements to support opportunities for redevelopment with an emphasis on safety, access, and multimodal facilities in the area. And the project study area is bounded by Spenard Road and Minnesota Drive to the west, Arctic Boulevard to the east, 40th Avenue to the south, and 36th Avenue to the north. So in the beginning of the project, our first step was to gather all the existing information related to this area, because as many of you know, that it's been studied heavily. And so we did gather all of that and summarize it into a report that was broken to different sections, such as the built features, social and economic and community characteristics, traffic conditions, and then the natural environment and physical context. Throughout the process, we've had stakeholder engagement. We have 2 stakeholder groups. One is institutional stakeholders, so your agencies and some of the larger landholders in the area. And then we've met with the Spenard Community Council as a way to reach the residents in the area. We did have an online survey that went to all the stakeholders to rank the project goals and to give us some input on our criteria for evaluating alternatives. And what we found was that the pedestrian facilities and multimodal connectivity were some of the highest, or ranked the highest for things that people wanted to see with this project. And so with that information, we started putting together alternatives. And so this first one is called Bicycle Paradise. And this provides sidewalks on either side and separated bike lanes. So it does separate all the different uses. The con for this one is that there is a limited right-of-way right now. It's anywhere between 30 to 45 feet along Chugach Way. And this would be the largest right-of-way that would be needed at 43 feet. The next alternative is called Pedestrian Oasis. It provides for wider sidewalks. This would give you a little bit of buffer for pedestrians that are utilizing the sidewalks and potentially snow storage in the wintertime. The con to this one is that we don't have a separated bike lane, although this area could be striped and signed for a bicycle boulevard. And this one has a 39-foot right-of-way that would be needed. Then we had Multimodal Love, which was kind of a compromise between the last 2 alternatives, with a multi-use trail or pathway on one side of the roadway and then a sidewalk on the other. And then all of these alternatives could easily be connected to other multimodal networks within the area. And then for a short section of the roadway between Cope and Industrial, we did look at what we're calling worn-off wandering. It was, we received a lot of input on folks wanting to have a sense of community and, kind of designate this area as theirs. And so the worn-off kind of lends itself to this by allowing you to have a street that has shared spaces, and the ability to maybe activate the street in a different way than what we normally see. The drawback for this one is that you do have like the entire street is shared by vehicles and pedestrians and bicyclists, but it does provide some traffic calming opportunities to slow traffic down. And that was one of the other things we heard, is that people wanted to make sure that traffic stayed at a slower pace through this area. And then last but not least is the moving motors alternative. So we recognize that there is continued redevelopment in the area, and that can lead to additional traffic that comes onto Chugach Way. And so one of the things we looked at is whether the roadway classification, which is currently a local street, should be changed to a neighborhood collector. It would help to move traffic more efficiently. The drawback, though, is that it would have a cross section that is much larger and a much larger right-of-way need, and really not meet the goals and objectives of what we've heard from the community and the stakeholders. Other opportunities that we're looking at are some traffic calming, which really could fit into any of the alternatives, whether it's raised intersections or potentially chicanes, as you saw in the worn-off cross-section. Multimodal connectivity, whether that's abilities to connect to trails nearby or roadway connections, and then amenities for placemaking, such as gateway features, lighting, bollards, benches, bicycle parking. And then other things that we've been looking at is snow storage, not only within the right-of-way, but are there opportunities to provide pockets of snow storage, and then on-street vehicular parking. So we developed some screening criteria to help us as we go through and evaluate these different alternatives. So we've kind of ranked them, whether they're priority, feasibility, and then just additional criteria. So for a priority, they need to have pedestrian and bicycle facilities, and then looking at traffic calming measures. For feasibility, of course, we want to make sure that we can easily get through with emergency vehicles, looking at the right-of-way impacts and snow removal. And then, of course, there's utility infrastructure within the area that we need to consider. Additional things that we're looking at, as I mentioned several times, the multimodal connectivity, the ability to do that easily, vehicular access and connectivity, and then aesthetics and placemaking opportunities. So right now we've developed these alternatives and the criteria, and we're going through and evaluating the alternatives and getting stakeholder input. Our goal is to finalize our report in December, which would provide projects that could be moved forward into like design. And so we plan to be done with our part of the project by the end of December. And with that, I can answer any questions.
Any committee questions on Chugach Way? Okay, anybody on the phone? Anybody from the committee question about Chugach Way? No? Okay, anybody?
I just want to, I own a fourplex that's in that project area, but I don't really think there's a conflict, but I don't want anyone to call me out on that.
Oh, closure too. All right. Any questions from the public or comments? All right, Laquita, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Okay. Last of the informational items, Title 21 parking amendment, Craig.
We should have Elizabeth and or Tom from the planning department. There's Tom.
Yep, and I'm also here, just not, I don't have my video up.
Got it.
Okay, go ahead, please.
Thank you. This is Tom Davis and Elizabeth Appleby from the Planning Department on the land use side, and we're just returning to the Policy Committee. We last visited in March during the pre-consultation phase of a major change to the Title 21 zoning ordinance. We usually wouldn't darken your doors regarding zoning ordinance changes. But in this case, what goes on in Title 21 doesn't stay there. This is an ordinance that carries out or helps implement multiple goals and objectives and actions in the 2040 MTP, as well as helps implement some goal 5 and some policies of that in the Anchorage Bike Plan. We're also watching the non-motorized plan. We're returning because we're just going to give you an update. We are headed towards a public hearing draft of this amendment in the first quarter of 2022, but we have just released the community discussion draft of this change to the code. What we're going to do is give you a few brief highlights and take any questions. We've released this, oops, excuse me, and I'll just go ahead and share. We released on October 29th, and we are seeking comments from the public and stakeholders in mid-December. This community discussion draft is out on our webpage, and Elizabeth is going to show you that where that is. But it's really influenced by consultations that we've had with numerous agencies as well as with the public. And over the next 2 months, we're going to be returning to those agencies, including traffic and agencies as widespread as DOT, fire department, street maintenance here at the Muni. I'll just go ahead and. So we're just going to hit a couple of the highlights from these 6 main proposals. So there are 6 main proposals in this change to Title 21. The first 3 have to do with basically allowing the kinds of developments that our plans call for, particularly in our more urban neighborhoods near downtown and midtown and along transit supportive development corridors. And by allowing, what I mean is when a development includes features that are known to reduce parking demand, or when those developments are in a part of town or a neighborhood in which parking demand is known to be lower than in the more suburban southern parts of the bowl or in Chugach Eagle River, that this ordinance will make it easier for them to, by right, have a lower parking requirement, sort of right-sized amount of parking required for their area. Because parking is so expensive and land intensive, these changes are really necessary in order for us not only to achieve our land use goals, housing goals, but also to help coordinate better with, from Title 21, with the goals for more balanced transportation system that AMATS is working on. So we'll just hit a few of the highlights from these 6, and I will go ahead and turn it over to Elizabeth.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to take this screen from Tom just to show the website. So this is our project website. So these documents here are for the community discussion draft. If I go look at attachment 2, which is the annotated draft code language, there is a handy cross-reference at the beginning of the document. So if there's a specific item or items that you're interested in, you can find it here, and then there's a reference to the page. This is what the document looks like. So it shows all of the text that is deleted and added in Title 21. So if it's deleted, it's capitalized and in brackets. If it's added, then it's underlined. And then there's also a corresponding page that is the annotation. So it tells you what's being done and and why. It provides some of the rationale for the code change. So I'll just scroll down to one random point here. So here's another example of a page, and this side is annotation. If I instead go to attachment 3, the clean version, that just shows you the final text. So it looks like this. We do mark if there is something that was deleted, and often a deletion means that we relocated it, since we took some parts of the code and put it in a table for easier reference. That's noted in the annotation, but this is just a cleaner version of the proposed code language if you don't want to see all of the myriad details of what we're proposing. Just last thing with the website is if you scroll down, we have some of our documents from the pre-consultation phase that summarize what we heard. So you can also look those over, and then there's contact information for Tom and me. And if I bring back up the slideshow, so Tom had mentioned we have the 6 overarching proposals. I'm just going to go over a few of them. So one of them is we would like a more complete menu of available parking reduction strategies. So we looked at ones that were not being used, or there was just some problem with the language, and took those out. We added some that we think were important to be available. Those are marked here. At the bottom, you'll see we have, for instance, one for adaptive reuse and historic preservation. So if this is provided, you can get a reduction. The other big thing is this non-discretionary heading. Is most parking reductions require a parking study, and they all require sign off by the planning director and traffic engineer director. And so we think it's appropriate to make some of the parking reductions, if you follow the requirements, you can just get it to a certain percent. Then one other of those 6 areas is this one, which is area-specific lower parking requirements. The map here shows what we have currently, where you can get a parking reduction in certain areas. Instead, we'd like to just have 4 neighborhood contexts that have a lower minimum parking requirement. So you'll see we have the downtown context. Currently, there's no minimum parking requirement there. And then as you go out, the reductions decrease. So the reduction in the traditional urban, I shouldn't say reduction, sorry, the lowered minimum parking requirement in the traditional urban neighborhood is more than that along the transit supportive development corridor. So it's about 10% less in the transit corridor, and then it depends on the use. It would range between 10 and 30%, if I remember correctly, from the table in the traditional urban neighborhood. The reason we think it's appropriate for these areas to have a lower minimum parking requirement is based upon what is called for in our land use plan and in the neighborhood and districts plans. And also just that those neighborhoods tend to have a grid layout. They have sidewalks, more often have access to public transit or other ways where people can access sites without driving, and things are a bit closer together there. We also did look at some data on car ownership as well. This slide we showed during the pre-consultation phase. This demonstrates the feedback we heard. So this shows that we had support for tailoring the parking and other development standards by neighborhood context. So this is a slide we showed during one of our design workshops, and then below is one of our questions that was on our online survey. And this again is some information we had shown during the pre-consultation phase, where we were asking for feedback on how much to reduce the parking requirements. Where we ended up, we feel, is between B and C. So B is matching the average peak utilization level, and C would be shifting the requirement to a less than average peak utilization level. And this below here just is another question that we had on our online survey that gave support for a mix of B and C. Current code is just matching the peak usage throughout the entire bowl. But we think some areas it's appropriate to go towards matching or shifting towards a less than average peak utilization level. And then I'm going to throw it back to Tom, who's just going to cover a few more of the highlights.
You're on mute, Tom.
We heard from the public, some members of the public were interested in eliminating parking requirements or further reducing them, even in outlying parts of the bowl. The percentages or reductions that Elizabeth discussed, we were very careful to tailor those to right size for the neighborhoods and to avoid completely depending on the streets with their on-street parking to take up the burden of any off-street parking that might go to on-street. Some cities have eliminated parking requirements for some areas or all their cities. They typically pair that with requiring the property owner to show travel demand management strategies, much like our parking reductions menu that we've provided. These other cities also have a different street design and more comprehensive street and on-street parking management, enforcement, and some differences in how they deal with maintenance and some of the maintenance issues they have where we have a lot of snow and no place to store it. So we were careful to avoid going further than what Anchorage can handle given its existing street management, street design situation. Whether it's the roll curb sidewalks on the right-hand side, our legacy of the folks not interested in paying for their on-street parking, as well as some of our challenges with parking enforcement and snow management.
Tom, the audio cut out for me. I think it may have for everyone else. I don't know if you're on mute again or if something happened with the connection.
Oh, thank you. What we have done is have inserted a proposed open option by which certain neighborhood areas or groups of property owners can propose for their area, for an area with delineated boundaries, to have an area where the property owners do determine when they develop how much parking to provide off-street, on-site. And as part of that they would be required to propose ways for improved street management in their area. But the general concept is that for those particular areas, we would move away from the picture on the left where off-street parking is completely taken care of on the individual properties to the picture on the right where there is more street management, whether that's parking enforcement, different ways of managing snow, and also designing streets for pedestrian access. But that is available in the draft, but we have not delineated a large area of, say, Fairview or South Addition or whatnot to have zero parking requirements in this ordinance. To go further, we really would be looking along that timeline or that future vision across the bottom of the slide here, where we would, after adopting this ordinance in the future, we would look at further studying our parking needs and then figuring out better ways to manage our streets, our public realm, to be able to accommodate more efficient on-street parking. Besides the parking requirements, we'll just hit on one more highlight from the 6 main proposals, and that is sort of the yin and yang of this ordinance is that as we reduce parking requirements, we're course, we're not doing that because we expect fewer people to show up on those parcels. We are seeing and forecasting and planning for a greater percentage of trips to and from those sites to be through the alternative modes. And that means shoring up some of Title 21's basic underlying standards for how buildings engage the public street, how easy it is to get from the sidewalk to the front entrance on foot, clarifying our standards for on-site walkways, and kicking up our inadequate bicycle parking requirements up a notch. We heard in pre-consultation strong support for improving our pedestrian standards in Title 21. And then the picture on the right there shows that it's possible. You have Huffman, DOT Street with enhanced pedestrian facilities and an on-site Walgreens with the drive-through that's making it easy for the pedestrian to get to that Walgreens. And so we think this is doable, and it can actually reduce development costs. A big part of the pedestrian facilities on site touches on the current bike plan and the developing non-motorized plan. The second most important infrastructure for bicyclists, besides the trail or the pathway or the roadway to get to their site, is a secure and practical place to leave their bicycle. So we are seeking to implement those plans. We are also taking in comments from the local bicycle community. And this is about providing adequate parking for existing and forecast bicycle users, coordinated with forecast mode shares and targeted mode shares among the different transportation options that AMATS plans for.
We need to wrap it up, okay?
And so this is our last slide. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tom and Elizabeth. Appreciate it. Any questions from the committee on Title 21 parking issues? Okay. Any questions from the public or comments from the public on the Title 21? All right. Well, thank you everyone for the great presentations. We'll go to item 8. Any committee comments at all? Mr. Trombley? No. Review. Mr. Whittleton?
No, thank you.
Ms. Alatel, any comments from you?
She had to leave the meeting.
Okay. Ms. Pokin?
No, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Constance, I think he left the meeting as well. Okay. Just a couple quick notes from DOT. Of course, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act was signed by the president here this last week. Our planning section, statewide program development, is quickly dissecting and assessing, but at a broad level, we're looking at anywhere between a 20 and 40% increase in formula funds across the board. That will also be reflected in the AMATS allocation as well. So on the low end, I think 20, Todd, and then but it may be as high as 40. So more to follow on that. Also, significant amounts of funds in discretionary grants have become available too. DOT is predominantly a formula-driven organization. We really haven't been into the grant business all that much. So it's something we're going to have to get smart in, as I think the city will as well, and other boroughs and townships within the state. But a lot of money available, and I would tell you that our congressional delegation did a great job putting Alaska-specific language in some of those grants. So we've got some real good opportunities. I would hope AMATS maybe would be reviewing for some opportunities as well, for some things we could garner and taking care of our checklist, whether it's ADA stuff or port stuff or whatever. So lots of good news to be had there. We've got a new commissioner, Ryan Anderson. Mr. McKinnon is gone. Ryan Anderson, he was the Northern Region Director. He's now been appointed the commissioner. He still has to go through the confirmation hearings during the legislative cycle, but I'm sure he will come out approved and appointed in that one. thanks to the AMATS staff for your assistance in the Matsu Borough MPO stand-up. I know, Craig, you've been instrumental in helping those folks. And I've heard you many times on the phone and really appreciate AMATS staff helping the Matsu folks in City of Wasilla and City of Palmer kind of get their head around what an MPO looks like and how they're going to stand that up. With any luck at all, my understanding is that'll go live April 2023 with the governor signing the operational agreement. Again, my understanding is that pot of money they'll draw from is really out from the same pot Fairbanks FMATS or FAST draws from, but not necessarily from AMATS. So there really won't be a diversion of funds from us. So good news for the Valley, but more to follow on that. And last but not least, if some of you remember who've been coming to these for a lot of meetings, a guy used to stand right next to that door. His name was Gene. Gene Carl Haberman. And he was always honest with us and holding us accountable for public involvement with a dash of admonishment, or maybe more than a dash from time to time. But Mr. Haberman passed away here last month at the age of 70. He was an advocate, I think, at most of the assembly meetings, both out in the Valley and in Anchorage. And he had a real passion for public involvement and wanting to make sure there was transparency and we were adhering to our public involvement plans and our own policies with regard to notification and such. And I think while he was a challenge to deal with from time to time, his heart was always in the right place. And so shout out to Mr. Haberman for all his efforts over the years. Anyway, worth noting, I thought he was a good advocate for public involvement. So whether you agreed with him or
thank you for recognizing that. Say the same thing, yeah. Very passionate advocate and came at it from a solid heart.
Yeah, he really did. And he wore a great suit. So always well pressed. So, anyway, with that, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
So moved. Thank you everyone for your participation today.